Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. It's time for Spawn Daily. Yeah, we've really been enjoying these. So, just a quick reminder what we're doing here. If you have been living under a rock and haven't been listening to Comic Source, we decided, Rocky and I, that we wanted to read all of Spawn because they have all the new Spawn titles coming out. Spawn Universe that McFarlane has started, Gunslinger Spawn, King Spawn, Scorched. But neither one of us had ever really read Spawn. So counting down to Christmas, we did the 12 days of Spawn Mist, the first 12 issues of Spawn. And we decided to continue it into the new year, covering one issue of Spawn every day because there's about 320, 330 issues of Spawn, 365 days in a year. We already had the first 12 out of the way. So who knows if we'll make it. Maybe we'll get tired of Spawn. Maybe we'll get spawned out. Uh, maybe we'll just get busy. Who knows? But we got a little bit of cushion built in because there are 365 days in the year, 330 issues of Spawn or what have you. So we're giving it a try, and what I have found, and I think Rocky probably also feels the same way, is they hold up a lot better than I expected. I mean, I remember loving it back in the day because the art was spectacular, and that had more to do with it than anything. We all know that McFarlane's not the strongest writer and tends to be a little over expositional, and that's still the case. Um, but especially when these guest writers come on, like the issue we're reviewing today is the second part of the Grant Morrison 3-part, and it's fantastic. The art, Greg Capullo, is fantastic as well. So these are really holding up, and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm excited to get to read all this Spawn, because the other thing that we've talked about is the fact that we're going to be covering 3 decades of comics over the period of a year, and we're at a much faster pace. We're going to be able to see the way the changing landscape and aesthetic of the comic book industry, and even the way society views things, violence, and different things like that, because Spawn definitely touches on pulp culture. We're going to see those changes, how life change and comic industry changed over 3 decades is reflected in the pages of Spawn at a much faster rate. It's going to be all condensed down to a year. So that'll be interesting as well. Once we get into like 300, up toward 300, which obviously 301 was the record breaker. But I feel like once we get up there, the early or the high 200s, 300 or so, we're really going to be able to look back and see, hey, look at the evolution of this character, and did the changing aesthetics and taste of the comic book industry affect it, or was Spawn always just Spawn? So what do you think about that, Rocky?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree, and it's also we also get to see the evolution of Todd, of just the Spawn stories themselves. We're reviewing issue 17 here as part 2 of the 3-part reflections written by Grant Morrison, and it's interesting because we talked before about some of the earlier issues. It was very exposition heavy, but of course that was with Todd McFarlane. Here we have the script is by Grant Morrison, and this particular issue, I mean, issue 17 we're reviewing now, 18 tomorrow. It goes very quickly. There's less exposition. It's much more action-packed, faster pace. It's amazing how some of these issues, of course, with a different writer, can read much quicker. They feel like a quick read. As we'll talk about, issues 17 and 18 uh, they read so quick. Just like you, I know that you were reading slightly farther ahead than I was. Issue 17 and 18 read like one comic because it just you get to the end of the issue we're going to be reviewing today, issue 17. You want to read issue 18 right away because you want to know what the heck's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing, and we talked about this yesterday when we covered issue 16, that being the first issue that Todd McFarlane wasn't listed in the credits. We've speculated a lot, and we'll hope we'll get an answer at some point how much McFarlane had creative input on these stories that other people wrote. The Dave Sim and Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, Frank Miller and Neil Gaiman. But technically, he wasn't listed anywhere in the credits for 16. That was the first issue. Same thing with 17. Same thing with 18. Um, so we talked extensively about the fact that Greg Capullo came on to do the pencils, and Rocky just mentioned how fantastic the art is, um, and I would think that the lay comic person, somebody who's not paying a lot of attention, might not even necessarily realize that this is a different artist, because the line weights and the line work is very similar here with the style that Capullo has at this time. Very similar to what McFarlane had. I did mention it yesterday. McFarlane's at times will exaggerate anatomy a little more. His work tends to be a little more cartoony than Capullo's. Especially you'll notice in this issue there's a scene where Terry Fitzgerald and Wanda Blake, Al Simmons' wife or ex-wife, I guess, or widow, I suppose I should put it that way, where they're sitting on the couch talking, and it's very much almost photorealistic in the way that Capullo draws it. You never really see that from McFarlane. His anatomy is always going to be a little exaggerated, but in terms of line weight, style, and just how sort of action packed and kinetic the art is, it's very similar. The page layouts, the way the panels are laid out on the page, also very similar. Maybe not quite as dynamic, maybe a little more um, standard from Capullo, with just regular boxes as opposed to a lot of insets like McFarlane tends to do. Uh, but for the most part, their art is very similar. But I think that it's going to be interesting to see, because, as I mentioned, I did go back and look at some of Capullo's early art, because this does look very different than his early work on Quasar, let's say, at Marvel, and it certainly looks different than his work that most people are familiar with most recently, which would be his Batman work or Dark Knight's Death Metal. This is very much a different style. So I'm curious to see if we can spot an evolution in Capullo's style, because he's on Spawn for quite a while, up into the 200s or high 100s at least. Doesn't do every issue, but he's with it for quite a long time. So,
Yeah.
anything else to add about Capullo's art before I dive into the story, Rocky?
No, no. He's like I said, he. There's a reason why he stayed on Spawn so long. It's it. He's very good. He captures McFarlane's sensibilities very well. They have a lot of similarities. So there's no question you could understand why he grew into the successful artist he is.
Yeah, again, Spawn was really the series that made him a superstar. So this issue kicks off again. Story by Grant Morrison, pencils by Greg Capullo. Mark Pennington does the inks for this one, as opposed to last issue. It was Dan Panosian, Art Taber. Uh, Tom Orzakowski still on letters. Steve Olaf still handling the colors. Last issue ended with Jason Wynn being teleported up to the satellite orbiting the Earth. Control, as it's was referred to, sort of a foothold for the forces of heaven on Earth, or at least orbiting Earth. And they brought Jason Wynn up and they endowed him with these angelic powers, and they dubbed him Anti-Spawn. So that's how the last issue ended. This one ends with Malbolgia, and again, a little bit of a different interpretation the way McFarlane draws him, but he's having a good old time. He's chuckling because Al Simmons in the last issue went to his grave because he was curious: am I resurrected? Am I living in my same human body, or is it something else? And yeah, we find out that his body is still there. He's tormented by the fact that he really is no longer human. He's not even in the same body, and Malbolgia is getting a kick out of kind of the torment trauma that that Al Simmons is enduring. He even says at one point, "I hope it hurts." You've learned a little more of the truth. The body that you currently wear is not your earthly body. Your earthly body's decaying in a grave. So I get the kind of get the impression that the body that Spawn is wearing now is made of psychoplasm, that substance from hell that can kind of take on different appearances and different sort of almost like a holodeck, right? Like Star Trek holodeck, take on different appearances and states of matter based on what the person perceiving is thinking. So we get a lot of information here. Again, Rocky's right. There's not a lot of exposition from Morrison, but there is a lot of important information here as Malbolgia takes Spawn to Simmonsville and says, "Hey, this is the place, doorway to my realm. Gates of hell stand open. Sure you recognize what you see. This is hell on earth," basically built by the substance your people have taken to calling psychoplasm, and it adapts itself to human thought. And when you died, your memories were imprinted on the psychoplasm. That's why it looks like your hometown. And just as your new Spawn body is composed of psychoplasm and can change shape, um, this town too can change shape based on thoughts and emotions. And he shows Al Simmons this memory that is imprinted on some psychoplasm there of a lake, and he's out in the middle of the lake in a small rowboat with Wanda, and it's the day that he asked Wanda to marry him. So again, Malbolgia is really twisting the knife once again, tormenting Al Simmons in a way he wants to break him, right? I mean, the whole reason he made the deal with Jason Wynn made the deal because he wanted the psychoplasm. From Malbolgia's point of view, he made the deal because Al Simmons was an excellent soldier. He was a great killer. He was a great assassin, even though he, may have been developing a little bit too much of a moral compass for Jason Wynn, which is why Wynn, gave him up. But the whole deal was Malbolgia thought that he was getting somebody who could possibly be a leader in his army in his upcoming battle against heaven, heaven against hell. So uh, again, it's really twisting the knife, and we talk about McFarlane not having much subtlety. There's not much subtlety in the way that Morrison portrays Malbolgia in a lot of ways here, but I do find it interesting the kind of the voice, the words that Morrison chooses. It Malbolgia before, when McFarlane put words in his mouth, tended to sound a little more I don't know, less relatable. He didn't he used flowery language, and it made him seem a little more fanciful, I guess we'll say. This Malbolgia, the way Morrison scripts him, he talks like the way you and I talk, but the stuff he's saying is still horrible. I mean, the deal that he's made with Jason Wynn, and how he's twisting the knife in Al Simmons is still pretty brutal. You
He's
agree,
evil.
Rob?
He's being a complete jerk. He's just rubbing it in. He's choosing. He doesn't lose an opportunity to insult Al Simmons, making it clear his life is miserable, and he's relishing in the pain and misery he's causing him. It's just, it's really, he's just rubbing. The knife is in, and he's twisting it.
Yeah, 100%. But I don't know, for some reason, the way Morrison writes him, he's I don't want to say he's more human, but I don't know. He seems a little more relatable, which makes it worse. When somebody is a god, and you can't really communicate with them because you're speaking on different levels. If they're evil or they're threatening you kind of just, what can you do? It's like if we talk to an ant, like we don't even speak the same language. This version of Malbolgia, I feel like he speaks Al Simmons' language, which makes it worse.
Well, yeah, I think he's less cartoonishly evil in
Yeah,
the manner of
exactly.
dialogue.
Yeah,
Mark Farland was always a little bit more over the top and almost like a cartoonishly
yep,
cliche evil, whereas Grant Morrison is a little bit more laid back, a little bit more like you said, everyday sort of talk. So
yeah,
it's just
like
probably just
yeah,
better dialogue, frankly. I mean,
yeah, just more realistic. You're right.
realistic, yeah,
That's exactly it. He's not so two dimensional and mustache twirling.
yeah.
The way Morrison writes them it's worse. It's worse for Al Simmons. Like, now I'm speaking your language. I'm twisting the knife, like you said. So anyway, back to the story. We do see that satellite, like I mentioned before, where Jason Wynn had been taken, and these other angels there, I guess they're kind of explaining the mission that Anti-Spawn has. The soldiers ready, Anti-Spawn prepared for his first battle. Let's initiate transmission and pray for a swift kill. So he is he's kind of fired down to where Al Simmons is, and Simmons is unaware that Anti-Spawn is on his way and is yelling at Malbolgia, "Where are you? You took my life. You took my soul. Where are you?" And all of a sudden, whoom! Giant sort of explosion as Anti-Spawn hits the ground, and Simmons like, I don't know what that is, but my skin's crawling and crackling. There's something in there, something bad, and we see that Anti-Spawn in a gorgeous full page splash, excuse me, from Greg Capullo says, "Hell Spawn, I've come for you." And yeah, we see him there standing in all his glory. And like I mentioned last time, costume, a few things similar. He's got some spikes, he's got some chains, but if you're watching us on YouTube, I'll specifically point out the belt, which has the Spawn symbol, but then it's got the circle and slash around it, which I think is just hilarious. It'd be the equivalent of Bizarro having the backward S with a circle slash through it. It's just
Yeah,
really
I
funny.
love it, man. I love this costume. This is just as
Yeah.
epic as Spawn's. I think it's very well made. I wonder if Greg Capullo designed this or if McFarlane
Yeah,
did.
good question. I would guess maybe a collaboration between the two. it definitely has tones of Greg. But yeah, I love it too. I love the fact that his helm is sightless. In a lot of ways, I like this costume better than Spawn's.
It's
And
sightless. Is this like the Batman who laughs? Is this why the Greg
right,
Capullo designed
yeah,
the Batman who laughs? Like, oh no,
yeah, yeah,
that's where it came
exactly,
from.
exactly. Spikes and what and the other thing to point out is he's bulkier. You know, he's bigger. Jason Wynn is a bigger guy than Al Simmons. Obviously, his body has changed a little bit because we saw him last time. He was uh, a little more
Rotund.
not yeah rotund, not overweight, but yeah, a little more rotund. Here he's very much the V chest and the broad shoulders, and yeah, he looks formidable for sure. We get a quick interlude here with the talking heads that we see from time to time. One of CNN, the other right wing guy, now on 40 Other News, and this just serves as a little exposition to tell us that um, Jason Wynn, the controversial presidential advisor, has been missing. Um, and the right wing guys like call me a crank, but this whole Wynn disappearance when he was supposed to testify or have a televised debate, linked in with the whole young blood covert operations, and so he's not really buying into that Wynn is missing. He thinks it's all part of a conspiracy. And as the camera pans back, we see that it's actually Terry Fitzgerald that's watching these guys talk. And as he's on the CNN channel, the woman says there have been rumors that suggest that Al Simmons was murdered by his own people. So somebody's talking who shouldn't be. And again, this is why people at the agency are after Terry Fitzgerald, or they're worried, they're keeping a close eye on him because they think that Terry might have something to do with these rumors, which is something that Wanda Blake has long suspected, right? That Al Simmons was murdered rather than killed in action. But he turns off the TV pretty quickly because Wanda's coming into the room and she says, "Oh, is that something about Al?" And he's like, "No, no, not really. Just talking about Jason Wynn being missing." And this is that scene I was talking about earlier where Wanda and Terry are talking, and almost photorealistic. Great art here and emotion from Capullo, and it just shows that Wanda Blake is not over Al Simmons. Just a reminder, a little interlude here, and that Terry is still, he's still worried. We'll put it that way. Um, so Wanda turns off the TV, and as she does, she says, does it really matter if Jason Wynn has vanished off the face of the earth?" And we're told, well, more than you think, Wanda Blake, because the scene shifts back to the fight between Wynn and Al Simmons. Although remember, at this point, Al Simmons doesn't know that Anti-Spawn is Jason Wynn, and
And it
he may
should
not
be
even.
it should be
Yeah, go ahead.
noted. I have to interject. It should be noted that when Wanda shuts the TV off, she doesn't use a remote. She does it by approaching the TV and pushing a button on the TV.
Yeah, that is kind of
This is
strange.
a dated. This is a dated. I mean, I thought they had remote controls back in the early '90s, but I guess not.
Well, they did. I mean, they did because Terry used it earlier to change the channel.
Yeah, but it's
So I don't
weird.
know.
She
Maybe
actually
she
approached.
wanted. Maybe she wanted some exercise. That's a good point.
Sorry.
But yeah, not only does Al Simmons not know that Anti-Spawn is Jason Wynn, it's not even clear that Anti-Spawn knows that he used to be Jason Wynn, right? Because it talked about his memories being um, wiped away, and it says for Jason Wynn has been reborn as the Anti-Spawn, stands face to face with his old adversary Al Simmons, though neither man suspects. Anti-Spawn might not even really know that he's Jason Wynn, and he certainly doesn't know that Spawn is Al Simmons. Al Simmons doesn't know that Anti-Spawn is Jason Wynn. So the fight here is sort of one-sided, and it might be that Al Simmons, or at least I get the impression that Al Simmons doesn't realize just how powerful the Anti-Spawn is, and we know his reluctance to use his energy because he knows he only has a finite amount. So Anti-Spawn blasts him back through the stained glass window of the church that is made out of psychoplasm. That's a replica of the church that Al and Wanda got married in. And it's a pretty brutal scene as he falls down inside the church with a lot of the stained glass like sticking out of his face. And apparently the church is inhabited by some other little minor demons or whatnot. This is, remember, the gateway to hell on earth. And as these other little demons start to say they're going to feast on Spawn while he's still stunned, Anti-Spawn comes busting in the church and says, "Stand away from him. He's mine. Filth, do you hear me?" So he's quite the melodramatic character here. Uh, so there must be something of Jason Wynn that remains, right? Because he always seemed pretty melodramatic. So he blasts Spawn once again, saying he's mine, and burns off all the other little guys that were about to attack Spawn. And Al Simmons is beginning to recover, but he's wondering, first of all, who is this guy? I've never faced so much raw power. Is he stronger than me? How come I feel like I know him? And Anti-Spawn continues to make threats. See how I burned off those guys? Now I'm going to burn you. I'll make you scream. So, because of this battle, a lot of this psychoplasm town of Simmonsville is actually on fire. And we know that the army or Jason Wynn, whatever group he works for, they have cameras and they're monitoring the town. And last issue, we met Major Vale, who was talking to Jason Wynn and learned about this town before Wynn was abducted by the Control and turned into Anti-Spawn. So Vale is watching, and he sees that Simmonsville is burning, and he wants to know what the hell's going on there. And there's another underling, I guess you'd say. And he said, nobody knows. Nobody knows where Wynn is. He's vanished. So we don't really know what's going on there. And Major Vale's like, well, I just got here, and it looks like this project's falling apart at the seams. And, Wynn said this is a doorway to hell, but it looks like all hell's broken loose there. And this program means too much to the U.S. government. Obviously, psychoplasm. I mean, that's a huge potential weapon, and they don't want to lose it. So Vale's like, nothing's going to stop me. Nothing on earth or in hell is going to stop me. That's for sure. I'm going in there, which for the most part, I enjoy the story that Morrison tells. But the fact that this guy who just came on the scene doesn't really know what's going on, because, he's got to know Jason Wynn well enough to know that Wynn didn't tell him everything.
Yeah.
So he doesn't really know what's going on. I get that psychoplasm is a really important potential weapon for the U.S. and you want to save the town, but what the hell are you gonna do? You're not even really a frontline soldier. You're a major. You're old. Like it didn't have like a ring of truth to me that,
Yeah.
oh, you're gonna go in there and save the day.
And
What the hell?
Major Vale already knows the fate of two other soldiers that went in there, because
Right.
Jason Wynn told him the fate of the other soldiers that Jason Wynn even referred to as fodder, I think, or
Yeah. Yeah.
basically pawns. So I
They
mean,
watched those guys get killed.
yeah. So I mean, he's got to know that and he knows it's from hell. I mean, he knows it deals with hell and the powers that they don't understand, and psychoplasm, and so yeah, as you said, I guess you could pass it off as the ego or the narcissism, or ego of the crazy military mind. But I actually think probably any military man out there would probably be insulted by the portrayal of the general here. He's
Yeah.
extraordinarily naive, but I suppose you could call him brave. But there's a difference
Yeah.
between brave and stupid.
Yeah. It seems to me like he would just go, we're going to send in a battalion, or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Uh, or at least if he's going in, he's going to bring soldiers with him. But that, we see that's not what actually happens. He just strolls right in himself. Like he's going to walk in and go, okay, stop. And everybody's going to listen. Like, yeah, that is ego run amok for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, the scene shifts back to Simmonsville, and Spawn's getting his butt kicked, saying he doesn't know how much more of this he can take. He tries to fire his powers at an Anti-Spawn and miss, which has to be really crappy for him, because he doesn't have a lot of power to waste. Then he finally decides to fire on him and misses. So he decides that discretion is the better part of valor, because he feels like the next blast is going to kill him. So he calls on his power to teleport, as he's done before, and he doesn't. It seems like he doesn't really have, at least at this point, a lot of control over where he teleports to. It seems like he either gets drawn to that church there in New York where he got married, or he ends up back in the alleys where he kind of considers home, and that's where he ends up this time, where the rest of his homeless buddies say, oh, they're used to seeing it. Oh, it's like the 4th of July. It's Spawn. Man, you don't look so good, buddy. And Spawn immediately realizes where he is, but he's worried that Anti-Spawn will be able to follow him. So at least it's that heroic instinct that Al Simmons that's showing through here, and he yells at everybody, "Go!" I don't know how long before he'll show up, and sure enough, he barely gets the words out of his mouth before all of a sudden there's another bright glowing ball there, and Anti-Spawn shows up saying, "You can't hide. I can track you through time and space. There's nowhere to run from death," and blast Al Simmons again at point blank range. And Al, to his credit, he takes a pretty good licking here and keeps on ticking. He says, "I can't see straight. Everything's broken inside. Blood in my eyes. The costume's alive, and he's wounded it." As Spawn tries to get up again, Anti-Spawn is taunting him, saying, "Don't you understand the pain, the burning white light inside you? I'll kill you, and so the angels will let me rest." So it's almost like the power that's inside Jason Wynn, the power that he's imbued with, sort of has a mind of its own. And Wynn himself feels like he's on fire, and the only thing that will kind of alleviate the burning or pain that Wynn is feeling is to unleash the power against Spawn. So Spawn's like, "Angels, what's this guy talking about?" And unfortunately, he takes another blast, and that's the last blast that he'll take. It knocks him out. He's laying there on the ground, and once again, we get some exposition from Wynn saying, "My head's filled with light. I can't even think straight. All I know is I need to kill you. I'm the fiery soldier of heaven, and you're just prey. And the time's up, Hellspawn." And that's how it ends, as Al Simmons is just beginning to regain consciousness on the last splash page, as Anti-Spawn stands over him with an energy sword extended out of his gauntlet. And just another fantastic splash page from Capullo, which I will say that's perhaps part of the reason why this feels like a little bit of a bigger read, or a quicker read, I should say, because Morrison definitely gives Capullo plenty of chances to show off his gorgeous art with either splash pages or large panels. So, again, I've been critical of Grant Morrison in the past plenty of times. I'm not a huge fan of his work, and again, like, this may be my favorite thing he's ever done. He definitely knows, or has shows that he does know when to shut up and just let the art do the work, which
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like Morrison's doesn't always go. His comics aren't always don't always have that aesthetic. Uh,
Yeah. I was
I think he
actually
did a good job.
surprised.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think just one more thing, Rocky. I was going to say, I think he did a good job in the Green Lantern that he did with Liam Sharp of that. So he knows how to do it. Sometimes I think he just wants to squeeze too much in. But
yeah.
anyway, what were we going to say?
No, I was just gonna say, I actually in this fight scene here, I'm surprised Spawn wasn't killed. The way Greg Capullo, drew the one scene that I have up there on the screen. Literally, there a hole is blown through Spawn's body.
Yeah.
Pretty much his entire torso is literally blown through. Like, and so I don't know how he survived it. Um, you kind of wonder if that doesn't kill a Spawn. And as we'll subsequently learn next issue, I mean, I don't even think that kills. A similar injury befalls Anti-Spawn later on, and it doesn't seem to kill them. So I don't exactly know how you're supposed to kill a Spawn here. Maybe that was just artistically, it looks fantastic, but boy, these Spawn and Anti-Spawn are two tough people. Um, one of my
Well, one thing that I'll say about that is, you one thing to keep in mind, we're told in this issue that his body's not really a body, not the way a human body is. It's just made out of psychoplasm, which can change shape. So you wonder, does it really? I mean, maybe Spawn's body only has a heart and ribs and whatever, because
uh,
that's what his mind imprints on the psychoplasm, because that's what he knows the human body to be. But yeah, what really does power the actual material body of
yeah,
a Hellspawn?
very good point. But if we don't know, I mean, if I mean, how can he die then? I mean, if he thinks, is it that if he, because his body's made up of psychoplasm, if he thinks that he's weak, he will be weak? Is that how that works? Because it takes
Yeah,
on his
possibly.
feelings and fears and emotions. So it does it really come down to willpower, maybe how he wills himself? The other thing that I found interesting is that you mentioned before how Jason Wynn, who is now Anti-Spawn, maybe is not fully aware of who he is, because it's not clear that even Jason Wynn is conscious of who he is. But it's almost like he's in so much pain. So this control, these agents of, I guess, heaven, this control group that created Anti-Spawn, it's like they're overloading his body with energy that he has to get rid of this energy to kill Spawn, in order to kill the pain because it's painful. If he, the more energy, it's like Jason, it's like anti-spawn has to get rid of the energy and wants to because the anti-spawn seems to be in constant pain. This is different than Spawn. Spawn is not in pain. Spawn doesn't even want to use his power because Spawn would prefer not to use his power so he can stay alive longer. And yet, ironically enough, anti-Spawn wants to drain himself of the power to get rid of the burning energy inside of him to get rid of the pain. So it's a very kind of different, it's a very different relationship with their powers and the way and the way they seem to work. I think so. I'm trying to get a handle in terms of exactly the difference between anti-spawn and spawn. And anyways, it's fascinating. It's interesting. But I'm wondering at what point is Jason Wynn, is he going to gain some consciousness? I mean, because if all Jason Wynn is he's constantly in pain and he has to get rid of this energies that he's imbued with, when is he going to be able to think for himself and what have you? And so in any event, it's moving. I would not think an agent of heaven of which anti-spawn is, because spawn is hell and anti-spawn is supposedly anti-hell, I guess. it's weird that anti-spawn is all about pain and suffering and wanting to inflict and cause pain and suffering. It's like you said, the mythologies almost seem to be flipped here. The good guys are agents of, the good guy's the agent of hell and the bad guy's the agent of heaven. It's weird.
Yeah, it really is. And I think we need to know a lot more about the forces of heaven and hell before we can really understand, what this war is about and who these guys really are. Like, does Jason Wynn still? I mean, is his body made out of something similar to psychoplasm now? His body type did radically change, so you wonder. But he wasn't killed, or was he? So yeah, there's clearly a lot we still don't know. So we'll see how it all plays out. But we'll at least get the conclusion of this three-parter by Grant Morrison next issue. And then Todd McFarlane doesn't come back for another few issues after that. We have another writer who we'll talk about it when we get there. It's pretty interesting. So yeah, fantastic issue. Love this three-parter, and we'll cover the finale of it tomorrow. So anything else to add before we sign off, Rocky?
No, actually, but I can tell you this. I'm looking forward to reviewing next issues because I had to be very careful and not say too much because I didn't want to ruin too much for the next issue, which is where a lot more, some more information and some interesting things happen. But I wanted to save some of my comments because these issues kind of merged together in my mind after I read them together. So I didn't want to spoil things for tomorrow.
Yeah, that's 100% true. Yeah, and these do read a lot. 16, 17, 18 do read a lot quicker than a lot of the previous, and it has everything to do with less exposition, like we've said. So anyway, that's going to do it, everybody. Don't forget, if you're not following Rocky's channel at YouTube, just head over to YouTube and do a search for Comic Space Boom ! That way you don't miss any of the content. Be sure you like this video, ring that notification bell, and subscribe. Conversely, if you check us out on YouTube and you want to be sure to not miss any of our other audio-only content, just head to your favorite podcasting platform or application on your smart device, do a search for the Comic Source, and subscribe. So we appreciate the support as always. Glad you guys are enjoying this daily Spawn ride that we're all on, and we will talk to you next time.
See you later.